In this episode of the Reclaim podcast, Acting Senior Sgt Anthony Pymm of the Western Australia Police shares his personal battle with PTSD and his journey to recovery.
Hey Anthony, thanks very much for joining me today. We kind of got in touch randomly a few weeks ago and realised our paths converged at some point about 25 years ago. Yep, and that being the WA Police. So I joined a few months before you did. So that brings your career to somewhere in the order of 24, 25 years.
Yeah. G'day, Sean. Thanks for having me on here. And yeah, you're right. 25 years it'll be this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked out that we were a couple of months short. You started before I did and moved on and done some other things.
Yeah, those 25 years, blink of an eye, like you said, like it just seems, even when I think about the academy, I can still name all the instructors basically. And I think the job for me as well, I forged some really good friendships because, you're with people that are in the same boat as you, as in share the same virtues of the job, so which aren't always pleasant.
No, absolutely. I've still got friendships with some of the guys from my academy, and the 6 months, I went in as a young 20-year-old boy and I came out a man, and it was hard and it was discipline. There was a sense of purpose to it, and no, you're right. Yeah, you share that sense of wanting to help the community and do your best.
So was your whole career in the Perth metro area, or was it?
No, so I've
done country.
So I've done some country. I've served in some regional locations, both in uniform and as a detective. And look, I enjoy the country lifestyle. It was always a slower pace to the city, but the investigations were full on, and you got that extra exposure to those investigations. And I just love the country lifestyle, and I think the camaraderie and the mateship that goes along with living and working in a country town.
It's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of a jack of all trades post, the smaller posts. Yeah,
it is, because you get involved in the community.
Yeah,
because you have to. Especially if you've got family and kids. You got to be that community person, and you got to be that copper as well. So you wear a lot of hats, but it's something that is enjoyable.
So I joined, like I said, in 1999. Then I left in August of 2005, just after I got my first hook as a first-class constable. And I transferred over to the Federal Police Counter-Terrorism Command for 12 years. But in that 12 years, I was posted over to Cocos Islands for 3 months, which is essentially a country posting. It was only 2 of us. And that was a jack of all trades kind of post,
And that's why I say, the country policing, you're doing everything and you're getting exposed to a whole lot more. I guess to me it's that sense of achievement as well, because the community respect you a lot more. Yeah. And they see you a lot more, so they appreciate the work that you're doing.
There is that appreciation. There's so many good aspects of the job, but it does come at a cost if you don't look after yourself. And that is really what brought us together today, is that we discovered we tread similar paths in that respect. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing how yours came about and how it manifested for you.
Yeah, look, for me, I always guess I lived to work, so to speak. I had it all around the wrong way.
Yeah.
For a good 20-odd years. Enjoyed my work, loved every minute of it. I'm married to a policewoman who, you're at work, you work in your home, you talk on the job, and, it was never ending. And look, I guess, being a detective, and mixing it up between uniform and detective, I've seen a lot of things, I've experienced a lot of things. And I think when you combine that with 20 plus years of policing, at some point your cup's going to get full. And in late 2021, just as my daughter was being born, my cup got full. And I started to withdraw from my family. It all started when I thought I was having a heart attack. I was at work, my heart was racing, and I didn't know what was going on. Started to feel pain, and I think it was just my mind simulating a heart attack. When I look back now and think about it, but I ended up at the emergency department and did tests, and they couldn't find anything wrong. So, we started to explore that with my GP and the specialists. And at the same time, I was throwing myself into work. I was becoming more withdrawn from my family. I was sitting on the couch a lot. I was lazy. I was checked out of life. I didn't know it. Yeah. In my mind, I thought I was doing really good. It wasn't until my daughter was born and my wife gave birth by a cesarean that after a couple of days, she begged the doctor to let her out so she could come and take care of me and my little boy, because she could see I was struggling and I had to get help.
Who initiated that? Was it your wife or yourself that you said you needed to get help?
Look,
what brought on that realisation?
Her coming home so early on after the birth and looking after us was definitely a key indicator that something wasn't right. We didn't know what was wrong, but obviously with a newborn, family come over, and family obviously got to experience firsthand how distant I was and how much I was actually really struggling and withdrawn. So it was a combination of my wife and some family members saying, look, we really think you should get some help. And, I trust their opinion.
Yeah.
And I made a courageous phone call to an inspector who I respected and knew had gone through some mental health battles himself. And within 24 hours, I was sitting in front of a psychiatrist.
So my story is similar in terms of I had warning signs, clearly looking back now. I had the warning signs that I just ignored. I had some wake-up calls that I didn't answer. And it happened over a period of time. I can't actually pinpoint at which stage of my career I started, but same thing with the withdrawal. Again, like you said, I didn't realise it. My wife did. For me, it was just like I was exhausted, like I'd do a day's work, and then because I was in the counter-terrorism space, so there was no outlet, so we couldn't talk, so I'd go home and just sit with it.
Be a recluse.
Yeah. And I thought that was all it was. Like my head was just full of the job. But there was so much more at play that I didn't realise. Like I said, I've had, a few wake-up calls and I ignored them. The last one I couldn't leave unanswered because it was so brutal. Let's just talk about that period of withdrawal. Because I think that's and I don't want to turn this into a gender thing, but it's a very male thing to do to bottle things up. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I guess the best way I describe it is, you're a police officer, you're a male, and you're invincible. You think you made of Teflon.
Yeah. Yes.
And, you're a family man, you got kids, and look, what I've since learnt is that I numbed my emotions. My emotions were that numb. I'd sit on the couch and I'd scroll on my phone. I'd eat Ben & Jerry's every night. Man, it was some good flavours. But look, it wasn't helping me.
Yeah.
And I got my wife with my kids, and she's doing everything, and I was just oblivious to it. And I guess I was having the warning signs, probably not as severe as you. I just thought maybe it was high blood pressure, a bit of stress, and all the rest of it. I was having these tests. But yeah, you just feel you're invincible. At some point, you just think, I'm going to wake up and everything's going to be all right.
I was posted over to Jakarta for 2 years.
Yeah, okay.
The hotel or the apartment I was living at was just down the road from the Australian Embassy, which we worked out of. And this particular Saturday, there were riots in that main street. So I'll just rewind a few years back to 2006. So at the time I was in Solomon Islands, again a riot situation. I was separated from my crew, and a mob of about 200 people attacked me. So severe shoulder injury, and I could quite have easily have died that day. But a paramedic from New South Wales saw this blue uniform on the ground, and courageous as he was, picked me up, scooped me up and took me back to base.
Wow.
Yeah. So that riot situation in Jakarta was then the trigger. I hadn't thought about Solomon Islands until then. Like, I broke out in a sweat. It was like I was back in the middle of that mob. I was hyperventilating, I was sweating.
Wow.
My supervisor was living a few doors down, so I knocked on his door and said, I'm in trouble. They flew me back to Perth, and that's when it started. Yeah. So mine manifested it was quite brutal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, if I'd honoured those warning signs earlier, it wouldn't have led up to that.
Hindsight's always a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I guess I don't know whether you experienced it, but as I said, up until making the phone call to get help, in my mind, I was the perfect husband and I was the perfect father, and everything was tickety-boo.
But the thing is, like, even when I got back, I went to the hospital, I was still stubborn. Like, I'm okay, it was just a little panic attack, I'll be okay. And then, obviously, the weeks and months after that, I was certainly not okay. So, how did you feel when they said to you finally, okay, you have PTSD?
I guess the emotions were very mixed at the time. For me, PTSD was always just a word. I didn't know a lot about it.
Yeah.
Thought it would never happen to me. But then at the same time, for me and my family, it was an answer and something to work with rather than not knowing what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, really mixed emotions. But I think I take away that the positive from it is I've now got something to work with.
That's exactly the same as me, mixed emotions about the diagnosis. When I first heard it, I didn't like it because now I have a label.
Yeah.
But then I got into a mindset of, okay, now I have a starting point. Now I have something to work with. And so how did your treatment look like?
Look, I was quite fortunate enough. I got diagnosed November 2021. And in January 2022, I was on a trauma recovery and growth program that was run from the WA Trauma Centre out of Hollywood Hospital. So I did a 4-week course. So I was there in January. So 4-week course. Look, that course it saved my life.
Yeah.
100%. I lived in. We made that commitment to give me the best opportunity was to live in.
Yeah.
So my wife, again, sacrificed herself to make sure she could look after the kids, to make sure I got the best help and the best treatment.
Yeah.
So that was really, really good for me, and that was the best way of looking at it. Is it's 100-odd plus hours of therapy straight up in one hit.
You didn't find that overwhelming?
Yeah, very overwhelming.
Yeah.
Look, I cried for the first time.
Yeah.
During that course, it was the first day I cried.
Mm.
It was like, the best way to describe it's like a roller coaster. But I went there with the mindset of, I need to learn the tools, I need to learn how to cope, I need to work out what the hell's going on with me, and I needed to practice it to move forward.
Yeah.
The program had lots of things taught you, the window of tolerance and sleeping and, everything that mental health sufferers suffer from, anxiety, and it's all done through talk therapy. So it was in a group of 10.
Right.
I was fortunate enough that the other 9 people were all from the emergency services areas, and we all had that common, bond through the emergency.
Bond, yeah.
Well, look, I accepted that I had PTSD, but the other 9, they battled it for some time, and
Right.
there was some disbelief. Some on the first or second day kind of accepted it, but some still going through to the 4th week were a bit, no, I don't have it.
Yeah, and there still seems to be, I don't know, from where I'm sitting, I'm sitting from the outside looking in, there still seems to be that stigma. Like, people don't want to be labelled as I don't like saying sufferer, as a PTSD experiencer. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely, it's not pleasant.
It's not pleasant,
You don't wish it on anybody.
No, I don't know, some of my symptoms, like, I could make sense of anything. Fractured thoughts, nothing made sense. Like I said, the isolation, that feeling of detachment.
Yeah.
I had a family around me, but,
Right.
I could be at a party and just not be at the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, profound loneliness in it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was found the loneliness, but I certainly had that detachment, and
Yeah.
I was emotionless.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to describe because you kind of feel everything, but you feel nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to public areas, shopping centres, because crowds freaked me out. I couldn't stand noise. I was really sensitive to noise, any noise not. So all these things were warning signs that I just ignored. I didn't question it. I didn't sit down and analyse it. And I know now I was in denial.
As I said, having learnt what I've learnt now, just as you have, you look back and you go, man,
Yeah.
what was I thinking?
And the big thing that held me back as well was fear, because I didn't know what was going on and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out.
Yeah.
I was actually scared of, I didn't want somebody to tell me, look, you're badly broken and this is it, Humpty Dumpty.
Yeah. No one wants to hear that.
And that fear was all in my head.
And I'm sure, as you've learnt, the mind plays wonderful tricks, doesn't it? And it can also be powerful at the same time.
Exactly.
Control the mind and you can control your destiny.
But the thing is, my mind at the time was because, it was this amygdala hijack.
Yeah.
So that part of my brain was just taking over the rational part.
Then there's the catastrophic thinking and everything else that goes
Yeah.
along with that.
Yeah. So it's not a pleasant place to be in at all. And people don't understand the magnitude of it because you are essentially quite dysfunctional. And everything else outside of that is you're just sending an avatar out to do daily stuff, and you've got to animate that avatar as well,
Yeah,
which
you're
is
right.
exhausting.
That's a good way of looking.
It's exhausting.
It is.
So my wife at the time was, civilian. Not that it matters, because even if you're married to a police officer, you're trying to articulate what is going on with you is very hard to do because you yourself don't know.
No.
How are you going to communicate effectively?
And I think the best thing about this program I went on is they actually had family nights.
Yeah, right.
So the participants weren't allowed to go, and the doctors and obviously the psychs who ran it had family nights, and they raised awareness to the family and educated them on PTSD and how they can support us moving forward. And I think that was, again, what saved my life, my marriage, gave my wife the knowledge, and she now understands that the smallest thing in her mind is the biggest thing in my mind. So early on, before the diagnosis and getting some treatment and all the rest of it, we would argue over trivial stuff. It's trivial to her.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's the biggest thing going. So she kind of understood that, and it made moving forward, the arguments become non-existent because she knew how my mind worked, and we were able to counterbalance and talk through things, which was really good.
So my diagnosis turned out to be complex PTSD because along the treatment journey, they discovered some more triggers. So what turned the corner for me basically was a process called, I did two, was EMDR and exposure therapy, both very brutal.
Yeah, okay.
Because what it does, I had to go and relive each of those triggers, frame by frame, second by second, until that emotional response to that trigger became less and less and less. And it's incredible how it works, because it's not hypnosis, but you go back into that event and it's vivid, it's clear. You can feel and smell everything that was around you at the time. It's incredible. It's a vivid picture, and then as you go along, as you go through that frame by frame and back again frame by frame, that vivid picture literally turns black and white into a faded black and white. So so the memory is still there. Like you can.
It's not as clear.
It's not as clear, and the emotional reaction is gone.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard so much about it.
Yeah.
Never have done it.
Yeah.
It was probably going to be on the cards, but obviously found other ways to obviously overcome my trauma as such and better position myself.
I mean, it's multifaceted. You can't just do one area.
No, absolutely.
You have to do a number of things, and it's not as overwhelming as it sounds. It kind of goes. They all work hand in hand together.
100%.
Fitness was a big part of my recovery. I played a big role, and I know it has for you too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so fitness for me, look, I've always been fit. I've always played basketball.
Yeah.
I stacked on the weight when I come for 8. Wasn't interested in training, wasn't interested in doing anything. And look, once I got my 4-week treatment, I was off work for a period of time, and I was always open to try a lot of things. And before I get into the fitness, I commenced Reiki healing and then kinesiology, and that's been a huge part of where I am today as well.
Right.
But from a fitness aspect, look, I've known this bloke called Sower the Hulk for a very long time, since we were little kids. And look, I followed his journey with the UFC and been a big fan, and I've actually travelled to Sydney to watch him fight in the UFC. And look, he'd always asked me to come and train with him, doing boxing and stuff like that, and I've always turned him down. And I introduced my cousin to him 5 or 6 years ago, because my cousin he does karate and wanted to do a bit of MMA, and so I took him under his wing, and we had a professional MMA fight and a few other things. And they both said, look, you need to come and box. Come down to the gym. And I was probably 8 months into my recovery, and look, I ran out of excuses, and I went and said, well, let's go. And I was just awkward as hell. Couldn't box, so I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Yep.
But I'd been training in the gym, and I knew I had to shed some weight and try and cut things down. And I went boxing one day with Sower, and from there it evolved. The good thing about training with Sower and the crew is it's a very safe environment.
Yeah, that's important.
Everyone's very welcoming.
Yeah.
And the first day I went there to box, Mitchell Johnson was there, the cricketer, training, because they were preparing for a corporate boxing event.
Right.
And then afterwards we went and had breakfast, and just to sit down with Mitch and Sower and the crew and corporate executives, and understand that they're actually dealing with the same type of pressures and stress, and having those really nice conversations about supporting each other. I just thought, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
I'm glad I've made that step to come and do this boxing and surround myself with these really great, fantastic people.
That boxing journey has then...
So it's evolved.
It's evolved. It certainly has. So
it evolved.
Yeah.
And after a bit of time, so I asked if I wanted to fight in the corporate boxing event that was held at the Crown Casino in November last year. He runs it annually. I said, why not? Look, by that point in my journey, I was doing really well, and I knew that, you know, for me to progress, I needed to challenge myself, and I was always up to challenging myself to get better, and then jumping in a ring in front of thousands of people and having a fight.
How'd you go?
Yeah, look, it was really good. I was blessed that Soa paired me up with my cousin.
Oh, did you?
And look, my cousin's been sensational, and his family during my my PTSD journey. He's younger than me, but he's a very wise old soul, and pairing up with him, it obviously helped with the anxiety, and I knew, you know, who I was going to be fighting, and look, we trained together and we prepped together, and, you know, I couldn't think of anyone better to have that moment than with my cousin. I beat him. Regardless of the outcome, getting into that ring and having a fight in a controlled environment to raise awareness for mental health and overcome my fears and my challenges was the biggest win of all time.
He's a great man, so I've got so much respect for him. He does a lot of great things in the mining space as well, in the mining area.
Yeah, he's definitely someone I draw inspiration from. You know, that process. Since I started boxing with Soa, like, I've dropped over 20 kilos.
Wow.
Continuing to lose weight. So I still go down every week, and, you know, I'd love to go every day. It's too hard with other commitments. So every Saturday, it's my time away to go train with Soa and the crew and be in that really nice and comfortable environment.
And that's a pertinent point, actually, that you raised, you know, that you felt safe in that environment, because obviously exercise, I would preach that to everyone going through mental health issues, just go and move your body, but do it in an environment where you're not going to feel intimidated, or because you say exercise, people automatically think, okay, I've got to join a gym.
Yep.
And then they walk in the gym day one, they're intimidated, they're out of their comfort zone, then they don't go again. So so find something or somewhere where you feel safe and protected. But exercise is key. It's a key pillar of trauma recovery.
Absolutely. I train every day, and if I don't, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
And it's a positive habit. My wife trains every day, and we know that puts us in a positive mindset, and it gets us going.
And then I haven't tried the other, like Reiki or anything like that. I've tried other modalities, a lot of breath work. I do a lot of trauma release that way, just to get rid of whatever's stored in the body. Yeah. And there's sound healing. There's so many things that would resonate with different people. Yeah,
and there's so much you can do.
There's so much you can do.
One thing that works for you might not work for me. So it's about that exploration and seeing what is right for you. But I always promised myself to have the mindset to be open to try anything.
Like I said a little while ago, fear was one of my biggest hurdles to overcome, and it was imagined. There's a saying that I like, and it says, fear is an inch deep and a mile wide. So there's vast expanse of fear that you imagine, and then you dip the toe in, and it's only ankle deep. So that first step, no matter what it is, as long as it's forward, is the hardest though.
Absolutely.
And everything from there is just a domino effect. From there,
The best way I describe that to other people who are in a similar situation is, day one, if you can't get out of bed, pull the blankets back. Day two, sit to the side of the bed. Day three, put your foot on the floor. You just keep building on that.
I used to loathe the cliche of baby steps. Take baby steps. I didn't want to hear that, but it's so true.
And the first day of this trauma recovery program was obviously living away from the family. And I joined a gym for the 4 weeks. From day one, I knew I had to start those baby steps.
Those baby steps,
Start those positive habits. So then by the time I got home, I went back home on weekends, but by the time I got home after this 4 weeks, I had some established habits to continue with.
Do you know your recovery, did you have time off work? Or?
So I was off work for probably about 5 or 6 months. So I took the time out to actually really focus on myself. Every day, from day one, I decided that I wanted to be very transparent about my treatment and my PTSD, and that was for the purpose of raising awareness. And people see you having time off, but every day I was working on myself. If I wasn't in the gym, I was walking around a lake, experiencing nature and appreciating what nature has to offer, or I was seeing my psychs. Every day I did something to try and improve my mental health.
So you took the 6 months off work. Was there a return to work program in place?
So I went on a return to work program.
Yeah.
For the first month, it was a couple of days for a couple of hours. I always made it quite clear to the police doctor and all that I was going to run my own race. What I mean by that is I didn't want to be forced to be back full-time and fully operational by a certain period. I wanted to, in consultation with all my medical team, be able to do it when the time's right. And my goal was to get fully operational. That's just who I am, that's in my DNA, that I wanted to get fully operational. How I would get there and how that would look and when, I had no idea.
Yeah.
But that was my goal. Look, I'd been consulting health and welfare since day dot, and I'd been seeing the police doctor, throughout the course of my return to work program and having these conversations and open and honest conversations. Yeah. As I said, I've always been transparent. And my next challenge was getting the courage to go and do my firearms training.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, because that would have taken some courage.
Yeah, the anxiety was huge. And I went there and I just said, hey guys, I've got PTSD. I've just been given the all clear to have a crack at this. Please be kind and please be patient. And they were very accommodating. And
excellent, yeah.
And for me, when I was at the Maylands range, there was some familiarity there. And a couple of the people who were doing their requalification shoot that day were familiar faces. And
that helps.
They made sure they were in the bays next to me.
That's great, yeah.
One of the older ladies was holding my hand saying, you've got this and I'm proud of you, and just reassuring me. And long story short, as soon as the pack timer went off, it was muscle memory, and I cold qualified, best shoot I'd ever done. And I turned around, I turned around and joked that I shoot better with PTSD.
And I think I feel there is a shift in respecting PTSD, because years gone by, people might have thought, okay, PTSD, that's for soldiers, military, and then that's it. I don't think people gave it the respect that it deserved.
No, you're right.
And I think that's changing.
I think so, and I think it's coming down to obviously more awareness and more education. Yeah, and as I said, I wanted to be so transparent just to prove that, I didn't know it at the time that I'd get myself fully operational and I'd be back full time. I had no idea what was going to happen in my journey.
Of course.
But I wanted to prove that just because you've got a mental illness, you shouldn't let it define who you are.
Absolutely not.
And that was my goal. And so that's why I was so open about it, and I'm still open about it, and having those conversations. And you're right, there is a shift because there's more awareness.
More awareness around it.
And people starting to talk more about it and realising, it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah, when we were young coppers, you had to bottle things up.
Yeah.
There was you go to a rough job, you just deal with it.
Well, how many times did you hear, go to Bunnings and grab some cement, and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of guys are yearning for that safe space that they could jump into and just open up.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's already there and they're just missing it, or it needs to be implemented. Certainly from AFP perspective, they'll talk it up in terms of we have all these strategies and things in place, but the delivery is quite poor.
Yeah, look, the processes are in place, obviously, with us, but where I feel there's a greater need in, obviously, at the recruit level and at the grassroots, and providing that education and awareness early on, because I know, and I'm sure if you knew what you know now, as a young recruit joining the job, you probably wouldn't be here. So I think that's important, and I mean, and having an understanding of work-life balance early on too.
Exactly. For me, there was none, and I lived for the job. It was just, I was consumed by it. Yeah.
I lost my first marriage through working too hard and throwing myself into the job. So, I think I've got my balance down quite well now, and I work to live. And it's I don't want my kids to remember me as being the best police officer or just a police officer. I want them to remember me as being, the dad who was there for their birthday parties and at their assemblies, and when they get married, being there, and that's what I want them to remember me for.
Exactly.
So my priorities are different.
So in order for you to do that, you have to be there for yourself first. Number one first, and then family, then the job. That's what I wish I'd known back then.
Same.
When you got back to that return to work, was the job supportive, or did you have a bit of pressure from the executive saying, look, when are you going to be operational? What's going on? Was it?
Look, I found them really supportive. As I said, I pretty much articulated from day dot that I was going to be the master of my destiny and run my own race, so to speak, within reason. And they certainly allowed that to happen, especially the police doctor.
Yeah.
We had some conversations about when we'll do it, and And look, she stuck to my plan, and I conformed with what her ideas were, and it made it, I guess, a bit seamless. I mean, you hear horror stories, and going through the process, I was scared shitless. Because you hear these horror stories, and I just thought, well, I'm just going to throw myself in, I'm going to be open, I'm going to be honest and articulate exactly how I feel and what's going on. And as I said, I think that was my saving grace, because we're all on the same page. I had no pressure, and it's definitely allowed me to get to where I am now. And
we both, would have lost colleagues along the way, and it's tragic that guys and girls are forced into that, not forced, but find themselves in that corner when it's completely avoidable.
I find now, we talk about being made of Teflon and having that persona, but I find now that I've been courageous, and having these conversations makes me much tougher than that Teflon. I'd rather be vulnerable any day of the week.
To me, that's real strength. You know that.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's how I view it now.
Yeah.
So it's not about I'm not going to cry because of this Teflon. It's be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best in my work areas to normalise the conversation around mental health, and it's we always talk about mental health. The police have I've done some keynote speaking for them, and I've featured on a few of their magazines, and they've just done a 7.5-minute video on my story that's been released to the agency.
Fantastic.
And I do have a lot of people come and talk to me about it, and I've received emails recently saying that 7.5-minute video I just watched has prompted me to go check in with my psych and get some help, and I think that if I had my time over again, I think I would check in with a psych every 6 months just to stay on the front foot, Brian. And as I said, look, I draw inspiration from SOA. We've connected. I've looked at your page, and I draw inspiration from the stuff that you're doing, and there's a lot of people doing some really good work out there in trying to raise awareness and try and help people, and that's what I want to do. I want to help my colleagues, and I want to help my mates be able to cope.
And that's the thing, policing is a tough job. Well, emergency services in general, it's a tough gig. Yeah. And then you might have pressures at home, or compound that with post-traumatic stress that's untreated. That's just a world of hurt, That's a very unpleasant place to be. I think that whether it's fear or reluctance to step forward, that needs to go.
I think it's the fear of being jeopardised in the job, really, and your career. People fear that as soon as you've got this status about you, that you're broken.
That you're broken,
That's your career gone. So I'm out to prove that, it doesn't have to impact your career. I've been acting at a rank higher for the last 10 months. I'm in a good place, and I'm doing really well, and, I'm making all these critical decisions, and I'm putting myself first, and it hasn't stopped my career. Yeah, there was a minor hurdle when I worked on myself and made myself better, but as a leader now, I'm a completely different person. What I wouldn't tolerate and would probably be short-fused pre-PTSD, now see the compassionate side to it, and I tackle it in a different way.
See, that in itself is fantastic, that you are able to act up without being looked at as, okay, he might not be able to handle this pressure.
But let me tell you, when I first acted up, I didn't realise it was going to be for this long. My district office, and I take my hat off to them, gave me a task that was quite challenging. It was a HR-related task, and it wasn't pleasant. They asked if I was capable of doing it before they gave it to me. And then when I said, I'm all for challenges, and I'm not going to overcome anything if I bubble wrap myself too much. Yeah. Then when I did the task, they even rang me at home just to check in on my well-being. I'm really supported, and from an executive, with the executive doing this, I know that I'm doing my bit to educate and change that culture, and by being so vocal about PTSD,
I'm sure other police are going to take a lot away from that.
I hope
that
so.
Because that, like you said before, would be one of their biggest fears, being ostracised and labelled as broken, damaged goods.
Yeah. One of my main conditions was I'd get that anxious that I'd get dizzy.
Yeah.
That was my main symptom.
Yeah.
And during my recovery, I honestly got sick of walking into a shopping centre with my family and saying, I'll be in the car. So I made those baby steps, and my little boy, he's almost 6, but he would have been 4 at the time. He kind of started picking up on it. When he was younger, everywhere we walk, I hold his hand because it keeps him safe. I actually said to him, I said, hey, look, Daddy doesn't feel safe at the shops. And that's why Dad always ends up in the car, because he doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
How about you hold Dad's hand and help me feel safe in the shopping centre?
Brilliant.
And he did. he would hold my hand so tight and he'd be going, Dad, are you feeling safe? Are you feeling safe? And that's how I started to enjoy shopping again, because my boy would hold my hand. Yeah, look, my family, my wife, they've been so fantastic during my journey. And the first weekend back after my 4-week program, when, you know, I had a aha moment, as it's called.
Yeah.
I sat down with my wife and we had a really long conversation, and one of the things I opened up to her about was, you know, for years when I told her and, you know, the kids that I loved them, it was just mere words and that there was no emotion. And I said, I've actually realised that my emotions were numb, and now, you know, I'm at the point when I tell them that I love them and all the rest is that butterfly feeling and is that emotion. And that was probably one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. And from that moment forward, my wife and I, you know, she's seen me cry many times now. She never had. It's amazing. You know, the communication we've got's the best it's ever been. And
You go through the horrors, but then you emerge with an upgrade.
And what my wife does that, you know, she just does subconsciously now is obviously being in the police as well. She has colleagues come and talk to her about me and mental health. And, you know, she's unwittingly provides them with such crucial advice, and she obviously gives her perspective of what it's like living with someone with PTSD. And she's helping a lot of people. She doesn't realise this, despite me telling her, but she's having those really big, crucial conversations. And she's helping people through the knowledge she's gained from what she's learned. Experiencing it with me. So,
no, you've got a strong message there, mate. You've got a really strong, powerful story there to share. Going just back to emotions, when you said, you know, you were numbed down, and I was the same, you know, and again, when it came to fear, I was actually scared of feeling, because I thought, geez, that's just going to be more pain. You know, I just didn't want to feel anything, because I attributed feeling or emotion with pain, because PTSD I was consumed by.
But you knew no better.
I knew no better. Yeah, so there is a lot of, I didn't go into any like self-sabotage. I suppose I did with the isolation, self-isolation, but I didn't have any vices or anything like that. You know, I was just existing. I guess I'm thankful for that, because
Could have been worse.
Could have been worse.
My vice was just Ben and Jerry's, man.
Yeah.
Stuck it on the weight. Like, no alcohol. I didn't.
No, I didn't.
I wasn't violent.
If I had to, I would say Tim Tams.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say.
Good.
Yeah.
Double choc?
I went the white choc.
Oh.
Yeah, because I'm like a real sweet tooth, and they're super sweet. So that's the only thing I do wish, like I had that genie that could, you know, just refill my So that's the only downside. But here we are, man. Yeah, we've emerged with upgrades.
We've got a story to tell.
We've got a story to tell. We're still doing the work.
Yeah.
We're still doing the work every day. And that's what it is. You never, I don't think, ever get to a point like top of the hill where you are like, wow, I'm at my optimum best here. Like, just constant work in progress. And it's not a taxing thing to do. Like, it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
Because you're learning so much about yourself.
Absolutely. I live with PTSD every single day.
Yeah.
But I put in the work every single day.
Every
to
day.
make sure that I'm not going to get to that point where I used to be.
Yeah, you know, I just really want to do everything I possibly can to stop other people from getting to that point, because it's a horrible place to be.
Absolutely.
You know. I guess I stopped asking the why me question, you know, because I'd asked that a lot while I was going through it. I'm like, why the hell? Why is this happening? And that's a redundant question, because you're not going to get an answer when you. So just accept it and move forward. Yeah.
That's it. And educate.
And educate, yeah. But mate, I wish you all the best in spreading your message, and you're going to do a lot of good things throughout the organisation, but externally as well. Because trauma is trauma, you know. There's domestic violence victims, there's child abuse victims, there's all sorts. It manifests in all different forms. The symptoms are exactly the same. It doesn't matter how it's caused. A lot of people in the same boat that are going to take a lot away from you. So,
I hope so.
All the best with that, man. And thanks very much for sharing all this, mate.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it.